Welcome, Be a Light community. This is my testimony and autobiography. I am not done. To ensure that viewer discretion does not need to be advised, I will be keeping this clean and respectful so that it can be viewed by all ages and audiences. I also will keep the confidentiality safe of people that may have been in my past that do not want to be publicly mentioned. And with that being said, just take this journey with me, walk with me with an open heart. I pray that through my story, you will be able to find revelation with God. You will be able to find peace and hope for your future, and you will be inspired and maybe encounter God along the way. All right, buckle up. Let's go. Be a Light community. It's chapter 1. I got robbed. This is I Am Not Done, my personal testimony and autobiography. So let's begin with where I grew up. I was born and raised in York, Pennsylvania by my grandparents. My parents split up when I was really young, and my grandfather was a minister. He ran a church. He was a mailman. He was a very respected person in the community. My grandmother was very a homestead homemaker. She loved me. She nurtured me. She cared for me. They were good people. They didn't cut corners. They didn't pay any bills late. They didn't ask for handouts. We didn't curse in the home. They didn't buy extra. If my grandfather's shoes would wear out, he would go get new soles put on them, new buttons put on the pants, things like that. They were old school and traditional. My dad was around, and my mom moved to Georgia when I was about 5 years old. So I already want to take a pause there. And I want you to remember this one theme throughout all of these chapters of this autobiography and this testimony, this one verse, which is Hebrews 13:5. And then after this, you're not going to hear many verses or me even introduce you to God, because how can I introduce you to God at a time in life when I didn't truly know who God was yet? But that verse would be Hebrews 13:5. Keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have, because God has said he will never leave you nor forsake you. God will never leave you nor forsake you. I really want you to remember that throughout the course of this autobiography testimony. So now I've told you where I started out. That was about my first 4 to 5 years of life. And just in that amount of time, my parents separated. I ended up living with my grandparents, which was a great home. But in that time, my mother got remarried. My dad was young. They had me both out of high school. He was running around doing his thing. My mom was only married for a short amount of time, and then she got a divorce. My dad, I remember being in the living room with him when the police busted through the door and arrested him, and my grandparents had to come home and pick me up and be with me, because I was there at home in their house with my father, because we basically shared a bedroom at that point in time in my life. I was very, very young. Faint memories, nothing that I can, is set in stone. Just little things that I remember, like the police busting in and then my dad not being there no more. But, I was covered by this amazing household that I lived in with my grandmother and my grandfather. And at the same time, when my mother got a divorce, she met another man, and they decided she was going to move to Georgia. But because of the stability I had in my home, she left me here to be raised by my grandmother, because my grandmother was already so in love with me and taking such good care of me, and I was in good hands. But see, before my mother moved, she would come pick me up. And this is where things really begin, because when I was in my grandparents' home, I had such stability that I did not see any of the crazy things of the world. So I remember one time I had went with my mom, and I remember there was some people that were fighting, a guy, a woman, and a man. And he was punching on her, and I'd never seen anything like that. So it was traumatic for me, a traumatic experience. And I remember blood just flying all over my face, and my mother washing the blood off my face, and me just kind of scared, because nothing like this have ever happened. I'd never seen two adults fight in that way, especially one being a woman and one being a man. And that in itself was traumatizing, that when I went out with my parents, I would see different things than what I was seeing in my household. So this is at a very young age, when I don't know how to process, anything, and I live in this traditional house where there's nothing but, I'm being sung to at night. I'm being read to at night. I am being nurtured and cared for so well that anything outside is so scary to me because I don't see that in my home. Now, I had a normal life. I was a normal kid, and I had to go to church every Sunday because my grandfather was a pastor. And during that time, excuse the noise in the background, there's actually a train coming by right above. It's gonna be loud for a second. Alright, so to pick up where I left off, I had a normal life. I was a normal kid, and I had to go to church every Sunday because my grandfather was a pastor. So I grew up in this loving household and kind of began to resent my parents, because what would happen was I would see these things when I was outside with my parents, and then I would go outside with kids on the block and in the neighborhood, and things would happen. Is like I would stick up my middle finger because they stuck up their middle finger at me, or someone would tell my grandparents, I was out cussing, and they would be so upset with me because they would say, we're not raising you to be that way. We don't do those things in this household. We don't use them words. We are not going to do what the world does just because those people are doing it. We're not going to be just like them. And I remember that put a lot of pressure on me as a kid, because I understood that I didn't see these things in my home, and those things weren't going to be accepted in my home either. So when I used to get in trouble, I just used to run upstairs, and I had this one picture of my parents on the wall, this one picture that I had of them together, and I just used to cry, man. I used to cry my heart out. At the same time, I'd be kind of growling, like where other kids would throw themselves around and punch things and yell. I would just be in my room just weeping and just looking at this picture. For some reason, I just always felt that if I lived with my parents, I wouldn't have got in trouble for some of these things that I was getting in trouble for in my household. So let's move forward. When my parents were young, they had me. And my grandparents had already raised kids. So they were in their older years, very set in their ways. And I never would tell them how I felt because I didn't want to hurt them, and they think that they weren't doing good by me, or that something was wrong that they were doing. So I would just continuously bottle up my pain of the resentment that was growing towards, my parents inside me. And, I remember going with my mom's family one time, and I remember them telling me, yeah, we were going to take care of you and we were going to raise you, as if like I was just up for grabs, as if no one cared about me in that sense, where someone was going to have to take me, but at one point no one knew who was going to do it. Then I'd go over here to my dad, and my dad would be like, King, don't listen to them. Like, that's why you're with us here, because you're a Newman and blah, 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 blah. And that was confusing as a kid. I'm not even in school yet. I'm like 6 or 7 years old, and I got people telling me at one point they were thinking about raising me and taking care of me, and I should appreciate them for that, and just weird stuff, So by the time, I hit about 7 years old, I had went to kindergarten. I'm in first grade now, and I'm realizing that, hold on, I don't look black, African American. I don't look completely white, Caucasian, and I'm not Spanish, Latino, or of any descent, of Mexican. So I'm not fitting in nowhere. And people are picking on me because they're like, well, he don't fit in here and he don't fit in here. So that kind of toughened me up and grew me up fast. You know what I mean? And I'm just kind of finding out how life works and how there's a racial division and tension. And I'm doing this all alone because I'm bottling these things up. I'm not telling nobody about them. And that in itself was very, very hard for me. And then on top of that, I have my next door neighbor. His older brother is a drug dealer of some sort. I don't know what. I just know that he came in the nicest cars and wore the nicest clothes, and everybody smiled when he came around, and everybody was happy. So I didn't want to be like my parents, and I didn't want to be like my old school grandparents. I wanted to be like this guy. He had the money, the cars, the clothes, the girls. He was respected. So that's who I positioned myself in life that I was going to grow up to be like. And this is only at about 7 years old. So when you fast forward a little further, I done developed a bunch of coping mechanisms because of bottling my pain. I had this little loving Filipino grandmother who loved me to death that I could not tell that I was hurting. And then my mom moved away and is in Georgia, and I haven't seen her in a bit. And now I'm going to begin to go down to Georgia in the summer times. So I spent my first summer in Georgia. I remember coming back, and my dad is out of jail now, and he's moving around doing his thing again. And I remember, because we shared the same bedroom in my grandparents' house, I remember there being a bunch of bottles in the room, liquor bottles, and I hid them so that my grandmother wouldn't see. And I remember coming the next day, seeing them, and I'm like, Dad, look, come here, I want to show you something. And he gets them and he smiles and he's like, thanks, King, for not letting Mom see that. Mom don't need to see that. So in a sense, him saying Mom, and I knew he was my dad, but we lived in the same bedroom. It's kind of like my brother, if you understand what I'm saying. But anyway, he told me to get in the car. So we got in the car and we took these bottles with us. And then we went and hung them on the courthouse. And he sped off after hanging them on the courthouse doorknob. You know what I mean? Basically, and was like, yeah, King, they're the ones that took me from you. And so I'm trying to process all this and understand, like, this is how the world works. Like, we're supposed to be mad at the judicial system. We're supposed to hide things from our mother. Like, I didn't know any better because I was so innocent from being so sheltered by my grandmother, thank God. But like I said, I can't show you God here in the beginning because I didn't know God yet. So when you fast forward now, you have me 10 years old, and I began to rap because I found it was a place that I can kind of put my emotion into instead of bottling it all up. So I began to rap, and I called myself the Dark Dragon because I spit dark, hot fire is what I would have told you at 10 years old. It's funny that I called myself Dark. And then it's also funny that I found out when my grandfather passed away that my name meant born of fire. But that wasn't until many years later, and we'll get there. So, I was in middle school at this time. Now, I'm probably about 11, 12 years old, and I'm beginning to fail school. I'm smoking cigarettes. I remember the first time me and my friends found this little cigarette butt in the commercials back in the day. They made cigarettes look cool, and all the older kids smoke cigarettes, so we don't have a lighter or nothing. We're just picking up these cigarette butts, and we're like, yeah, I'm teened up, and we're thinking that's cool. So fast forward 6 months later, I'm actually smoking cigarettes. So I'm this little kid before school with this group of other cigarette smokers, just smoking our cigarettes in the morning before we go in. We were off of school property, so the school people actually told us we were good. As long as we stayed off school property, they couldn't tell our parents. We couldn't get in trouble in the school, and no one cared. So here's all those kids just smoking cigarettes. No adults to say, hey, put that down. Nothing. It was just accepted. And by the age of 13, I just started stealing, and I stole a lot. Everywhere I went, I was stealing. It wasn't even peer pressure or, you know what I mean? It wasn't any of those things. I wanted my own money, and I found that if I steal things, then I could sell them. Or if I steal money, then the money's mine. Or that's what I thought. So finally, I'm in the mall, and my cousin wants these pants that are $50. And I'm like, bro, if you give me 20, I'll just go in and get you the pants. So I go in the store, I put the pants under my hoodie. Meanwhile, the owner of the store is watching me do all this. And on the way out, he grabs my wrist. So here's this little kid. I'm dragging this man. He's holding onto my wrist as strong as he can. He must have already called the security for the mall, because here comes the mall security super troopers running around and tackled me like I was a grown man. I remember hitting the floor so hard. And, at that time, that specific day, I was actually supposed to bring my BB gun and my knife to the mall with me, because that's how I thought I had to roll, because that's how I viewed myself. I remember I met one of my best friends in life for the first time in church, and I asked him, you want to go to the mall with me? This is that exact same day. And he looks at me and he says, yeah, sure, and comes up to my bedroom, and I open my drawer, and I have all these knives and BB guns and different little weapons that I made, and I'm like, I'm going to take this one and this one. And I remember him looking at me and saying, bro, why do we need these things? Like, you're scaring me. I don't think I want to go to the mall no more. Is someone going to attack us? Like, just leave them at home. And I'm like, all right, man, I'll leave them at home. I don't know why you acting like that, but yo, we'll leave them at home. And I went to the mall that day, stole a pair of pants, and got arrested. Thank God I didn't have those things on me. So that's a story in itself. But when I got arrested, I remember thinking, I'm not scared to get arrested. I'm not scared of the police. The only thing that I could keep thinking of is how disappointed my grandfather was going to be when he got here. And my grandfather got there, and, you know, he got me out the police station, and once I got in the car, he just asked me why. And my grandfather was always big on independence and making a way for yourself and building your own lane. So I told him, you know, I just wanted my own money, grandfather. And Tatai, I called him Tatai. And I got my own money by stealing. And I didn't have to ask you for nothing. And although he was very upset with me, he didn't say much else, because he understood as a young man where I was coming from. I did get in trouble. I did get grounded for a very long time. I probably stared at that picture some more up there, just hurt and wondering, like, why do I feel this way? Why, when I have parents here, am I getting in trouble for these things that I see other kids doing and no one's saying nothing? And then, you know, I began just stealing. I'm pulling on car handles. I'm stealing here. I'm stealing there. I was stealing so much that family members had things stolen from them and began to accuse me of stealing it from them, even though I had nothing to do with the things that were stole from them. But that's how bad of a reputation for stealing that I was being cultivating when I was only 11, 12 years old. So when you fast forward to a few years more, I'm about 13, and, you know, I wasn't raised any of these ways, so I would really hide this stuff that I was doing, and I had to be in by 9 p.m. On school nights, so I would honor that, and I would come home by 9, and my grandparents would think I was just out with friends, but I was probably stealing, smoking weed, smoking cigarettes. And then finally, I met this girl, and her mom was a huge drug dealer in high society, you know, world, PA, in high society areas. She was selling all these things, and the people that were buying them were in suits and ties. They were lawyers. They had government jobs. They had political positions. And I'm just seeing all these different sales go down, these drugs on the table. I'm helping count large amounts of money, you know. Meanwhile, she's, you know, has these corporate ladder people coming in. So I'm seeing a whole nother side of the hustle and the world through a lens of a society that I know nothing about, because I'm just this little city kid. So it opened my eyes that, like, the whole world is messed up. And the only people that are good people are my grandparents, because even these people who I view as better and got their lives together and they don't live in the hood and the ghetto, even they're buying the drugs, more drugs, spending way more money on the drugs. And I mean, that opened up a whole new realm for me. So I started selling weed at that point, and I learned that I could sell and smoke for free as long as I could buy enough to sell some, and the rest would be mine. And that's what I did for, you know, many years. I just started selling weed and smoking weed, and I'm partying and with girls and we're running around, and I mean, nothing super crazy happened at this point. I'm just a kid. I'm still just a kid. I haven't even hit 14 or went to high school yet. And I remember I would lie to my grandparents, because my dad would allow it, and say I was at his home, and I would stay out with my dad, but I wouldn't be at my dad's. I'd be at my girlfriend's, or I'd be out all night somewhere else, and my dad would vouch for the fact that I was at his house. So I was able to just roam the streets and do whatever I wanted to at this very young age. And then by the time I had went to high school, I had got jumped a bunch of times. So my dad gave me this little can of mace to keep with me in case these boys kept jumping me. That mace turned into me getting jumped more, and my dad gave me my first gun. And he told me, you know, these kids are not going to keep on doing this to my son. He said, use this. Don't take it to school. Be careful, but use this next time. Pull it out on them. Let them know, King, that we don't play that. You know, he was kind of raising me to be a gangster. My dad literally apologized to me for that later in life, but we'll get there. So now, you know, I'm moving into high school. I'm angry. The years are just flying by because I'm running around doing whatever. My dad moved out to the East Side Projects, so I met a lot of new friends on the East End. I'm seeing people that have brothers and sisters that aren't alone in the way that they're raised, and I'm making friends and seeing that my household is the only household that I see that operates the way it does. Everybody else seems to live in dysfunction, but it's okay and it's normal. And I kind of wanted that. With a flawed mind, with being so angry, that's what I wanted, was some type of normality where I didn't have to feel like I was a bad person because I was bottling my anger and hiding all these things from my grandfather and my grandmother. So now, the very first year of high school, the wall in the building had fell out. So they put us all in trailers. So now high school's uncomfortable because we're moving from indoor to outdoor from these trailers. I'm with the wrong gang of kids. We're just smoking. We're leaving the class. We're leaving the trailers. We're smoking right outside the trailer doors, smoking weed at that. Nobody's saying nothing. No hall monitors, no teachers, nobody. It was basically acceptable. Then we would come to class. We would, geek out, not even let the teachers talk and speak. And this was normal. This was every single day. It was normal. So I'm failing. I'm not caring about school. I'm not caring about life. I'm stealing. I'm smoking weed. And then finally, I met some friends that drank. And I started drinking. And then I also met T, who is now my wife. And you'll see in later chapters how that progressed. But we were hanging out, and she was older than me, and she could buy alcohol. So I would hang out with older friends that would have alcohol. And now I'm smoking, I'm drinking. And then a friend of mine started popping E. And I found out that I had a baby on the way. And with that baby on the way, I was a child that was about to begin raising a child. You see, I met her in 10th grade. By 11th grade, I dropped out of school. By my 18th birthday, I had my first son on the way. And then I couldn't keep a job. We lived in her dad's house. I didn't have no position in life to be raising a child. And then we started arguing because I'd never been with someone 24/7. No cousins, no brothers, no sisters. I was always alone. And we started arguing, and I just remember blood just running down my face one night because, she had scratched me all up because we had a very heated argument, and this became normal. I remember people telling me, why do you keep letting her do that to you? Because I wouldn't hit her. So she would just scratch my face, and it was a horrible situation. And it was because we were young and we knew no better. So I have this child now. We're fighting. I'm running around. We're not even together as much as we used to be, me and her. And I just wanted to provide for my child. So I'm stealing, and I began to sell more weed. And as I'm selling, I found this job, first job that I thought I was going to keep. And I worked hard. I got my first check. And for some reason, I said, I'm going to take this first check. I'm going to buy some drugs, and I'm going to sell them drugs to make the check become more money. And I called a guy I knew, and I'm like, bring me so-and-so. And when he brought it to me, there was a guy riding with him. And he got out the car. Hey, yo, give me everything, bruh. I'm not playing with you. I am about to put one in you right now. Come up off. So I, reached in my pockets. I'm talking to the boy I caught. I'm like, you really gonna do this to me, man? Like, I got a baby. This is all I got. You really gonna do me like this? And, after a few minutes, he just I walked backwards slowly after giving him everything I had. And that was it. I was so mad after that, bruh. All I wanted to do was get revenge. All I wanted to do was get bigger and more respected and richer. So the next time that I seen him, not only was I going to be providing for my family, but now I'm going to this guy when I see him. And I'm putting money on his head because I'm going to make enough money that nobody's going to disrespect me ever like that again, because they know that I have enough to put bread on their head. Meaning put a payment so that someone would go find you, hunt you down, and hurt you. And that really set me off the edge. I remember sitting in the car and the gun my dad had gave me. I remember just screaming and punching the ceiling and punching the dashboard and just throwing myself around. And I remember grabbing the gun and I remember putting it right here. And I'm just holding the gun to my head. And I'm like, I just want to end it. I don't got no money now. He took everything I had. I'm angry. I just want to end it. And something came over me, was like, nah, you're not going to do this. You're going to make this money. You're going to get yourself right and you're going to find him. And when you find him, you're going to